Mine is simple. I'd like to firstly appreciate being invited to such a good and insightful platform whereby we're discussing something of which I think might change the face of our country and the world at large. I just also wanted to comment based on what um, Africa Gola was saying, and to also agree in that I agree with what she was saying in the sense that, you know, being taught in an African language has its own advantages. And because if we can think about one thing that she also said, which is to say that if you are teaching an African child in English and they do not understand a certain concept, that alone means they have to go back to the drawing board, decode whatever they are being asked, try to understand the linguistic terms that were brought into, you know, their brain or their atmosphere or their environment, so to say. And then from there, be able to then go back and answer on what they are being questioned. And if you look at that alone, that is a long and lengthy process, which would require one to leave their own comfort zone, one to leave their own cultural, you know, imprints to now attach themselves and assimilate themselves with, you know, the English language. And by assimilating themselves with the English language, automatically then one has to join forces with the culture in itself so that you understand the culture. And from understanding the culture, that's when inversely then you are losing your own culture, because we are more invested in understanding how things should be done in the English language and ultimately in the English culture. So that alone becomes problematic. But if we are giving room to, you know, towards the growth of our languages, already we have, you know, the lexicographers unit, and it's a national thing. We have people like Penselb, and if we can try to, you know, join forces with these certain individuals and also have our own, you know, initiatives that are willing to push children and push school going kids towards the advancement of knowing their own African indigenous languages, then I think we would be going somewhere. I think also, lastly, another thing that I think would be important is the whole idea of having our own lingua franca, a language that we can use, you know, our own indigenous lingua franca. Because if you look at the current ongoing talks that involve or include the likes of Swahili being, you know, the mother language for Africa, I think we could have bypassed that train of thought if we had already, you know, started talking about which languages or which language is you know, predominant, and how can we make sure that this language spreads across the different domains. And if it does, then now we are sure that within our shores we have different people who are able to converse in one indigenous language. And because they are able to do that, it becomes easier for even people, you know, joining us into our borders to actually learn English and another language. But if we continue to isolate all these languages, we will have growth, but the growth won't be seen, because in as much as we'll be advocating for those languages, it will be isolated. Everyone will be advocating for their own. I'll be advocating for Xitsonga and Chivenda. Someone will come and say, I am isiXhosa only and isiZulu. But if we find common ground and see the bigger picture and somewhat look at reinventing the wheel in the most positive way by checking to say, okay, how was the English language introduced? There were even cases whereby in 1910 and so on and so forth, there were feuds between the Afrikaners and the English. And those,
Nail,
oh,
sorry, man. Sorry.
let me
Can
leave it
I
at
ask
that.
you? Thanks, man. Thank you so much. Thank you. Um, uh, I do see, Buiswa, your hand was up. Is that the previous hand from the last session? Because I didn't see
No,
your hand go.
no, it's up. I would like to make some comments, and I'm going to try
Okay,
and be
so
very
I'll appreciate it if you're short.
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
yes, yes. Most of the things that the other commentators have said are fine. I would like you. Okay, one thing somebody asked if there is an attempt at bilingual education anywhere in Africa. I have an example of the Eastern Cape, which introduced in 2010, mother tongue based bilingual education, which has shown improvement in classroom participation, better results in maths and natural science and technology among those schools in which it has been applied. And another example I have through reading was in Nigeria some years ago. There was a 6 years bilingual education program that was funded by Ford, but although it succeeded, unfortunately, when the funding stopped, they stopped it. We need to look for our own initiative rather than depend on foreign funding. Now, the other thing I want to comment about is harmonization. I'm not sure if it is that popular. Neville Alexander tried to introduce it. It wasn't popular. But think about translanguaging. I don't have enough time to talk about translanguaging, but it's the other thing that you can think of instead of harmonization. And then the third thing I want to say is Tagaza and both Ms. Tagaza and Africa Gola said, one said there are no translation of terms, the other one said there was no terminology. However, I want to tell you that there has been terminology creation since the mid-80s, insofar as I know, and there are lots of terms that have been created after 1995 in the country. I've been one of the people who were involved in those under the auspices of the Pan South African Language Board. The problem with I don't know in other languages, but in our language, isiXhosa, the problem is that these terms are scattered all over in those corners where people do translation. We need a way of collecting them all together, consolidating them, and then standardizing them, and then agreeing with each other that this is what we say for this concept. But terms are there. Believe me, terms are there. There's lots of translation and terminology creation that has taken place, that is still taking place. We just need a coordinated effort. I will stop there because there's such a lot to say about these things.
Wow. Yes. Thank you, Buyiswa.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate the conversations that have been had. And I think they serve to highlight the complexity of the conversation. If one observes our history, mother tongue instruction had a better chance in the Bantu states than it does at the moment. The fact that the Bantu states have been dismantled, it has meant that people have sort of become cosmopolitan. The radio as well has become very commercialized. They don't carry purity of language. Parents have got aspirations for their children to be able to be taught in English, which is why one would also explain the rise of low-cost private education. But the fact of the matter is, this whole topic is very complex. Ngugi wa Thiong'o wrote about decolonizing the mind. He wrote it in English. We're all talking in English. I think it's helpful to consider bilingualism because essentially the reason why we learn language is to be able to communicate. In a globalizing world, we need to be able to have a means of communicating across multiple territories. Yes, language becomes a carrier of culture, but culture has got to adapt. And if culture does not adapt, and our languages as well, they will face extinction. So it's a challenge that we all face. And sometimes I cannot help but wonder if some of the sentiments that we express around the need for mother tongue instruction solely are just not academic sort of desires, because the situation on the ground is that parents will send their kids to schools where they believe there's a better chance of their children to be taught better. And one of those variables that leads the perception around being better is instruction in English. So harmonization as well is a very difficult concept, because I once attended a conference where some lady said, if you're going to standardize in Sepedi, for instance, I speak Kilobedu, and Kilobedu and Sepedi are quite different. I will feel left out. So this is a very complex issue because language is about identity. And if you're going to import Kiswahili as part of something that I need to adopt for the purposes of saying I'm talking African language, it's got nothing to do with my identity. But it will serve a purpose of maybe standardizing communication in an African language. But if we're going to standardize, there is English, is dominant already, why reinvent the wheel? English is adding on average 1,000 words per day. How long is it going to take for us to catch up? And sometimes the nomenclature gets lost in translation. So it's a very complex issue, but nonetheless, it's good that we're exploring it. Thank you.
Wow, I'm going to stop now and just say to everyone, I am so excited that we had this conversation this afternoon. Because one of the things that Symphonia for South Africa wants to do is to connect people and to have conversations around issues that are pertinent to the future of our nation, but to the future of our children, and for them to succeed. And I really want to thank every participant who made comments. For those of you that made comments in the chat, I want to say thank you to you as well. And then to Africa, Gola, Africa, thank you for your insights. It is critical that we have the insights that you shared this afternoon. And then to Yandiswa Kakaza, Yandiswa, on behalf of everyone this afternoon, I also want to say thank you for the other perspective around what can we do in the future. I think it's important that we consider what are the trends and what are those trends telling us about the way forward. And so thank you, Yandiswa, for your insights. And I want to wish you and Ali Bali every success in the work you're doing. The work you're doing is really moving our nation forward. So thank you so much.